Alright, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to attach handles onto cups for your assignment. These cups are thrown, they're in the boxes that are here, and each student is going to put handles on 8 coffee cups. So I've got a few coffee cups here of different sizes and shapes. I've got some handles that I made with the extruder. I've got these little handle kind of formers to help you make a specific shape of a handle. I have some slip and a scoring tool. In this video, there's going to be some questions on Edpuzzle. You'll need to answer those questions, and you can start putting handles on my cups once you have finished that Edpuzzle and get 100%. Okay, so first thing, when you're grabbing cups, we want to make sure that if there's any things that need to be cleaned up on the cups, that we do that before we put the handles on. So some of the cups are going to need, most of them, a little bit of cleanup. So it's very simple. With very clean hands and no water, you'll be able to clean the cup up, but just by smearing your finger across any spots that look like they have texture. You can see here it's a little bit of pressure. I'm just smearing away that clay. This is from the place where someone's hand was. If you see anything on the rim, the same thing. On the bottom edge, we cut these off the wheel. We don't want to have this sharp edge on the bottom. And so the first thing we're doing in the cleanup process is going to be also to kind of clean up that edge. So I'm just running my finger across it on the bottom edge. And the goal isn't to get rid of 100% of the little flaws, but it is to clean it up as much as possible. And you can see that I'm running my finger across the bottom, cleaning the bottom up as well. Okay. If you do need a little bit of water, it would be a single drop that you would spread out everywhere. If you put too much water, the clay will get sticky and will get a little bit messy, and that's something that we would like to avoid. So now that I've got the bottom of this cup cleaned up, I do want it to be lightly concave, so I'm just going to very lightly push on it or tap it against my palm. We want to make sure it sits on the table well. And we also want to make sure that where we're working is incredibly clean, that we don't leave any mess on the bottom edge. So here's our cup that is cleaned up. Each cup could be a little bit different, so I'm going to run through these really quickly. You'll notice the bottom on this one still needs that same cleaning around the bottom. There might be small marks on the sides. You can see I'm just running my finger on that bottom edge. Notice I clean the table off each time. You can very lightly round the bottom out like this, and that will kind of create a little cleaner area. You can see I'm just kind of tapping it against the heel of my hand or pushing in lightly to make sure the bottom is clean. And the rim of this cup is also clean. Okay. If the cup has spiral or swirl lines on it, or it's been trimmed, some of the cups have been trimmed, then there will be much less cleanup for those. You'll notice some of them on the bottom will have this texture on there. Try not to touch that. We still want to clean up this edge a little bit so it's not sharp. Make sure you always clean the table off. We want to get rid of fingerprints. And any little crumbs that are on there. So I've cleaned up these 5 cups. And now I'm ready to start getting my handles ready. I have some handles that were made from the extruder. There'll be handles for you, or you can make your own. And you want to make sure that you can bend the handle into a shape. This will give you a uniform shape. This is a shape that can go on a cup, but it needs to also match the shape of the cup. Certain shapes don't match certain cups. This is not the right shape for this cup. This is much better, but it's too far away from the cup. So we want to make sure that we understand what the purpose of a handle is, and that is for our fingers to go inside the cup, and then the cup to stick to the body, or the handle to stick to the body of the cup. We don't need extra space in here, just enough space so that our fingers aren't touching. So while this is the right shape, it's a little too long. I could cut off some excess. You can see there's too much here. And I can try this. And that looks okay. But it would be better if it was just a little bit closer. So you'll notice I'll bend the handle a little bit. And I want to get the handle closer to the cup. And that is a little bit better. Now, I don't want the handle to be dented or have marks on it as best I can. I can use a small amount of water, again, a single drop. And I can smooth out certain parts of the handle. The trick with handles is less is more. The less you touch it, the better. So let's do another handle and touch it less. Once you have a handle made, you can let it sit and dry a little bit. It'll be easier to attach in a few minutes. I can take this handle, I can bend it over this mold. Notice I'm trying to touch it as little as possible. There we go. Again, this maybe doesn't go quite on that cup, but it looks better on this cup. Again, if we imagine my fingers going into this, it's a little bit further out than I want. That might be okay, but it might be better if it was just a little bit shorter. That looks just right. You'll notice when my fingers go on the inside, there's about a half a finger's distance. It will shrink, and that looks good for that cup. Let's try another shape. You can see that's far too big for this cup. We don't need to use the whole mold. We can cut it shorter. And you can see that this handle could work there. You don't have to use these foam molds at all. Let's use one more. See, that would work. It would also work maybe on this cup. That looks about right. But it's too big for this cup. A smaller one would work for that cup. So maybe this one. If you're not going to use the molds, which is fine, you can prepare your handle by lining it up with the cup and just letting gravity bend it. Remember, we don't need to use the whole piece. The less you touch it, the better. So I'm going to very gently set it down, cut it, and you can see that would work. Now, on a lot of these cups, the placement of the handle is very important. We do not want the cup's handle to be on the rim or above the rim. We want to make sure that the top of the handle is below the rim, not at the rim, but below it. On this cup, I would put it here. If I rotated it because it has a spiral, I might put it even lower on this side here, but I would probably attach it to the spiral. And depending on where I attached it is where I would place it. On a cup that has a wide bottom and a narrower top, I would probably put the handle closer to the rim, and I'd want the bottom of the handle to attach at maybe the widest point of the belly or slightly above that right here. That's where the handle would go. On a smaller cup, our fingers still need to go into the cup. I would probably make the handle a little smaller. And I would attach this handle. What I want you to notice about this handle is it's kind of awkward in that it has a bend here, a flat spot, and a bend there. I want this to be a nice curve. So I'm going to play with it just a little bit, touching it as little as possible. Notice how clean my hands are, how clean the table is. And that right there would be great. You can notice that I'm going to put the handle right attached to that bottom edge, and then right here where it lands. And you can see if I put 2 fingers in there, they would just fit in there fine. So now that I have my handles made, and I have my cups cleaned up, I'm ready to attach them. I've got my scoring tool here, and I've got some slip and some water. It's not just water, it's like slippy, muddy water. You can get this near the sink, by the mud sink, in a splash pan, in a bowl from a pottery wheel. And then there's also the can that you could dip a bowl in and get some of this out. But we want liquid slip to be attaching our handles. Okay, so on this cup, like I said, I'm going to attach the handle here. I think I'm going to use this larger handle. When I go to attach it, it would be best if the place where I attach it and it attaches to the cup sits flat, and I'm going to wiggle this into place. So it's important that I think about where it's going to attach, and there's a little bit of balancing to this. You can see I hold my finger still, and I can use this tool, and I want to kind of mark where it's going to be attached. If that's the spot I'm going to put it, then I'm going to scratch it in between these lines. And so you can see I made some marks. And so here I will scratch the handle, and notice how thoroughly I scratch. I scratch in one direction, I scratch in another direction. You'll also notice when I'm scratching it that I scratch more than where the handle's going to touch. If you look at where these handles touch, you'll be able to see scratch marks all the way around where the handle's going to connect, because this part of the handle here is going to go out and blend in, and I want it to blend into some scratch marks. Now, with the handle, you can also scratch, and if I really want to attach this handle well, I might just very lightly depress this clay so that where it contacts the cup, there is a flat surface for it to contact. That's right where it will contact. And then here on the bottom, the contact point isn't going to be like this, it's going to be at an angle. So I might take this and do the same thing and just very lightly kind of press on that angle. Very light. Now I can scratch the handle very lightly. You don't need as much scratching on the handle itself. Notice how my handle is almost unchanged. There are small little imperfections that we will clean up. Not all the handles have these textures on them. That makes it actually more difficult if it's not a smooth handle. Notice when I put the slip on that I'm blobbing the slip on. I don't want to smear it across the scratch marks, but I want to put a wet layer of slip onto my scratch marks. And if the slip is a little outside the scratch marks, like there's more all the way out, that's okay, because we're going to clean that up. I'll take my handle now, and I'm being very delicate with the handle. I have my finger on the inside, and I line up my scratch marks with where I put my handle. I press in very lightly. I'm kind of lightly holding from the sides, and I wiggle this back and forth. And the wiggle back and forth really is what suctions that in. And it's a very light attachment. And then I'm going to move the handle up a little bit. I'm going to make sure that it's straight. I can see my handle is slightly tilted to the side. So I'm going to tilt it this way. I want to make sure it looks straight this way. And on this bottom part here as well, you don't need to put your fingers on the inside for this one, but just wiggle back and forth. You can see I'm rocking my fingers back and forth. Wiggle back and forth, and you want to see that right there, a little bit of mud squirt out. Look on this side. You see a little bit of mud squirting out, a little bit of mud squirting out, a little bit of mud squirting out all the way around. The top isn't attached yet. It's not going to fall off, but it's not quite attached. You can see here, we want to avoid blending all the way down. We only really want to blend it where we scratched it. So you'll notice I'm just kind of pushing down on the handle, and notice the mud squirting out from everywhere. Okay, and that's the attachment. Less is more. Look how little I pressed on the handle. Okay, when I want to clean up any of those excess scratch marks, I use the slip and the brush. You can take a bowl of water and just use water as well. It's a little bit cleaner, and I can just brush away any excess slip. If there's too much water on my brush, I can brush that away and use a drier brush, and that will kind of clean things up. But I can brush away any slip. And if there's any excess scratch marks, if I keep brushing where those are, it'll smooth those out. Okay. And then on this side here as well, I'm going to brush. I can brush here too. And I'm just brushing that connection to get rid of any slip. I can put water on my brush, clean my brush, and then brush. If I have any inconsistencies in my handle, water on a brush can clean up the handle quite a bit. You don't need this much water. It's not going to hurt. But I can brush some water on my handle, and now my handle is attached. I can see a little bit of inconsistency here, water or slip. So rub that. And this cup has a handle. Now, I could also at this point make slight modifications to the handle. This to me is a little too narrow. I'm going to just lift up a little bit. And you can see that just gives a little bit more space, because when the cup shrinks, the handle's going to shrink in. I want enough space for 3 fingers to fit in there and not touch the sides. I could also, if it was too big, push up a little bit and make it shorter. So there's one handle. I'll do the next handle here on this straight cup. On the straight cup, I was doing this one. You can see another way to do this is to put a little slip on the handle before you scratch it. Line it up where you think you want it, and then just rock it back and forth. And that's going to leave 2 little halos of slip. Then with my scoring tool, I will scratch a little bit beyond that all the way around. And now there's already a little slip on this cup as well. I'll put a little bit more. But there's a little bit, which is good. So I've got my scratch marks. I'll take my slip. Put my slip on there. I've got my handle here. It also has some slip on it, which is okay. I'm going to very lightly scratch the surface of this. Now this handle, unlike the other one, is going straight. So it's going to go straight onto the cup. I still will do the same thing. I'll attach the handle. I will line the handle up, making sure that it's straight. I'm going to wiggle the handle down, and you'll see some mud squirt out. I'm going to wiggle the handle down and look for mud to squirt out. I'm trying to touch the handle as little as possible. On this handle, I want to make sure that it stays tall enough for my fingers to fit in. So as I wiggle this down, I should see bubbles squirt out from everywhere. On the top, sometimes it's good to support from the inside, and you can see that little bit of left and right wiggle is going to get mud to squirt out from everywhere. Left and right wiggle. There it is. Okay. There is my handle. You can see I'm kind of lifting it up a little bit. And now I've got my handle for my cup. And there's handle number 2. Okay, let's do the smaller cup. So I've got my handle here. This part of the handle looks like it's going to go straight on, and then this part of the handle looks like it's going to be at a slight angle. So I'm going to very lightly and gently angle that part of the handle. There we go. I could put it here, but I think it looks good right where there's a change in direction. That's a good place to anchor the handle to. I could make this cup have a slightly taller handle like that, but I think it looks good because it's a smaller cup with a little tighter handle. Again, you can take water or slip, brush it on the handle. You can roll that or set that down onto the cup. Make that little watermark that you see. Then I'm going to scratch it where that watermark is. Now I don't want to scratch way too big. There's a lot more cleanup work. I want to scratch just where the watermark is, maybe a little bit outside that. If it has texture on it, that's okay. It just means we need to wiggle the cup a little bit more so it sits into that crease. Okay. Now, if the clay starts building up on your scoring tool, you want to clean that clay off. Otherwise, it will make a mess of your scoring and you'll have more to clean up. Slip. Score my handle. Again, this doesn't need to be a lot, just very light. 2 directions is good. It's very important when you're attaching your handle each time to place the handle before you start doing the wiggling. Make sure it's aligned correctly, that it's not leaning to the left or to the right. That looks a little bit straighter. That looks lined up. I'm going to take this bottom and attach it. Notice I've got a finger on each side and my finger in the middle. I'm going to just push down and then wiggle back and forth until I see that mud squirt out. Wiggle back and forth. There we go, and you can see mud squirted out all the way around. Okay, and I can check my level, make sure it's level. And then for the top, the same thing. I wiggle back and forth, very light pressure. It isn't super important that we blend this smooth. That isn't what's important. I'm going to very lightly just press down on it. But I'm not trying to blend it super smooth. I actually don't want to blend it over that line. It won't look good if it's blended over that line. The attachment is strong because of the scratching, not because you smear it. And the glaze is going to cover up this connection, and it kind of looks nice sometimes when you leave that edge just like that. When you don't blend it in, the glaze will highlight that edge and it can actually make the handle look better than if you blended it in. It's a preference, but it actually is a little bit easier to make it look nice than trying to perfectly blend the handle in. Now you could use your hand to smooth these things out, but a brush tends to work a little bit better if the handle is small or you've got big hands like me. You can see anywhere that I see slip, I'm just brushing that slip back. I want you to notice, you can see I have some scratch marks. I went pretty wide there. The side of a paintbrush works really well. You can just keep brushing it, but we don't want to have any visible scratch marks. And so sometimes as it dries, you'll notice them and you'll want to go back over it. You'll see I can just brush a little bit of water again on my handle. If this didn't have grooves, I would probably just take my finger and go like this. But because it has grooves, the brush can get inside those grooves and clean that up and kind of straighten up where I bonked it a little bit with my fingers. Okay, again, I can check the handle, make sure it's straight, and I like the shape. When I look at this handle, I still see a little bit that the handle doesn't look quite good here. I like this curve here, and then here it's kind of awkward. Now that it's attached, I can play with it a little bit. So when I play with it, I usually try to push from only the inside first, and you can see I'm kind of lifting up a little bit. It's very gentle. I can also take my finger and kind of pull up a little bit and pull the handle up. I can pull back down, and I can just do little micro adjustments to get it to look how I like it. And that's okay. There's my third cup. For a cup that has this recurve, there's more room for your fingers inside of this negative space. Instead of it being straight, if it was just totally straight, we still have that little extra space. So the handle can actually be a little bit closer to the cup. So if I was putting this handle on, this looks kind of awkward, but I can lengthen this out. Maybe I flip this over. Maybe I change the shape. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just tightening that curve a little bit. And now the handle is a little bit closer to the cup. You'll notice on this one this time, if I attach it here, I need a little bend here, so I might push in just a little bit there. So that will attach kind of on that underside of the curve. On this one, I could do the same thing on the opposite. I could push there, or I could go and I could cut away a little bit of this clay and I could cut it straight. So this part can go a little straighter. And there we go. That's where my handle will go. Okay. So I could try to balance it. I can hold it here like this. You can see I'm supporting it. Make sure I like where it's at. I think I want this to attach right inside that curve, so right above that little bump. And I would mark it on both sides. Okay. You can see I marked it a little lower here, so I want to kind of go straight across there when I scratch, so it's there. Notice I scratch up and I scratch down. Here to here, I scratch left and I scratch right. I'm always scratching in more than one direction, just like that. A light touch is very important. When you use a light touch, you're not likely to warp the cup. When I'm holding this cup, some of these cups are wet. They're stiff enough to put handles on, but if you squeeze it, it'll change shape. We don't want to change its shape. So we try to be as delicate as we can with our hands. Notice I always clean the table off so that I never set my cup down unintentionally on a sharp or rough piece of clay. Okay, and again, I line this up, making sure that it's straight. Wiggle back and forth to see the mud squirt out. You can see I'm doing like a side to side and or an up and down and a side to side. Either way is great, or both. On this one here, the same thing. Just kind of wiggle it down to get it to seat. Gentle downward pressure, but the side to side is what kind of anchors it in. Okay. And then on this part here, you can see I'm just wiggling back and forth, making sure I see mud squirting out all the way around the handle. And on this top part, the same thing. You can see I'm pushing up a little bit. I'm not trying to blend this completely smooth to the cup. It isn't to say you can't blend it smooth to the cup. It's just a little bit more work. And it will take a little bit more time. You can see I blended that in. I'm going to wiggle it back and forth, and that is ready. That's got its handle. I go around the outside. I could have done that first so there wasn't so much water. We don't want to put water all over the cup. It makes the cup sticky, so that would be a light mistake. Should have brushed some water off first. I see some excess scratch marks here. Touching those up. Try not to get water on your hands. When you're making handles from extruded handles, you don't need to have any water on your hands. No water. There's other ways to make handles. This is the way that we're going to do it for your project. If you want to try doing it the other way, try that on your projects. And if you get good enough at it, I'll let you do it on mine, but you have to practice. This is the easiest way to make a handle. Okay. All right. There's another cup with another handle. Last one. So for this cup, I've got a handle here. If you've got a cup that has a wide bottom and a narrower top, again, it's just like this cup. There's a little bit of negative space here, so when we put our handle on, it can actually be closer to the cup. When it's straight, you have a straight line, but when it curves in, you have more. So on this cup, you can see that I have this curved area here, and this is going to give me a little bit more space for my fingers. I'm imagining my fingers going right about here. It's different than a straight cup, because a straight cup, your finger space is going to be straight on this part opposed to being curved, which means the handle needs to be a little further away. So when you have this recurve here, similar to this recurve here, you can have the handle feel a little closer to the cup because there's more space. So here's my handle here. Again, I don't want to attach to the top, and usually if it has like this bottom belly here, you're going to make the decision of either attaching the handle at the widest point of the belly or where it slopes up. And I think this one is going to be right where it slopes up. And so that's where this handle is going to attach. And then you'll notice on this one, the top is going to attach relatively straight, but on this one, it's going to be at an angle. So I'm going to push in a little bit on that angle. And this one is going to be just a little bit of an angle too, not much. And so that subtle thing there is going to help me get that handle to be straight. I'm lining it up. Just pressing it down. You can see I want to try to get it as straight as I can. My handle got a little tweaked. So that is there. And that is there. Okay. So here is where my scratch marks go for the bottom and for the top. Put some slip on there. All right. And then I'm going to scratch the connection. Going to wiggle this slightly in place. I can attach one part first, and that'll kind of help it stick so it won't fall off if I move it a little bit. Then I can line up this other piece. There we go. And then I can do the same thing with this one here. Just wiggle it on. Very light pressure. If a little bit of this pattern goes away at the connection, that's okay. Glaze is going to cover some of the texture up anyways. All right. And then in here, you can see I'm kind of pushing down and wiggling. I want to see mud squirt out all the way around. I can see there's some mud that hasn't squirted out there. Okay, there it is. All right, and there is our handle. Let's do a little bit of cleanup. And this time, okay, there is our last handle. Now, you'll notice that this handle is a little bit crooked when I attached it, that it kind of leans to one side. I can take it while it's wet and just give that little bit of a tweak, and it should be right. And there we have it. So here are 5 different cups with the same texture handle, but 5 different shapes of handles on each cup. It doesn't really matter to me which way you put a handle on, it just needs to look right. So if you look at these cups, if I was going to critique these cups, I would look at this cup and I would say that this handle is in a pretty good spot. I wish it was maybe a little bit higher from this edge here, because glaze can tend to run off a handle. So if anything, this could have just been shifted up just a little bit, or had this handle be a little bit shorter so the attachment was a 1/4 inch higher. If I was going to critique this one, I think that this handle is just too thick for this cup. It's the wrong handle. You'll have choices of different handles. This handle is better for a bigger cup because it's thicker. This cup, because it's smaller, would probably do with a thinner handle. It also looks a little overworked. There's just dents, and I don't like how I can see little finger dents along the handle. With this cup here, it feels like there's a little lump right here, and it would look better if this either went in a little bit more, like that. That subtle thing makes a difference. A handle is a line in space, and so I'm looking at the outer edge of that line, and I want it to flow naturally with the cup. So if there's a little bump out there, it's different than it is there. But this handle looks pretty good. If anything, it's a little bit crooked still. Hard to change that because it was attached crookedly. This handle here. When I look at this handle, this one looks pretty good. I would probably say, if anything, that this handle, this bottom connection here, I can see a little bit of scratching there, and it looks like it should have been pushed in a little bit more there on that edge there. And with this handle, I can see a small dent right there. It looks like I didn't brush the slip very well on this edge here. And then I can see some scratch marks that I missed. And you will notice as the slip dries and your cup dries a little bit after putting the handle on, it's almost like the scratch marks reappear. Sometimes how when you leave class and you think you washed your hands really well, and then you look down when you're in your next class period and there's clay on your hands or on your forearm, you're like, how did I miss that? Those scratch marks right there will become more obvious later. Subtle things glaze will cover up. Big ones, it won't. Okay. All right, so there's my critique of those cups. I would accept any of these from you guys. You guys are going to be doing 8 of those. If you have questions, refer back to this video after you do the end puzzle.